So, as is the case at times when preparing a homily for our beloved Grange community, um, I work on a homily and then there is some inspiration and I go in a completely different direction. And that is the case for this Sunday. Um, I work on it. And then I got up and I, for whatever reason, glanced at my bookcase and saw James Hollis's book called Living Between Worlds. I don't know if any of you have been able to read or listen to any of Dr. James Hollis's work, but he's a Jungian analyst. He's written 16 books. And he's been an incredibly amazing mentor to me, and I think many others who are committed to the spiritual life, to the inner life, and to what depth psychology, and in particular, Carl Jung, can contribute in that effort. I actually had the good fortune of meeting James, I think it was 26 years ago. I was working with a Jungian analyst in Atlanta, and James just published, which I think was his very first book as an analyst, called The Middle Passage. It's sort of his take on what all of us go through, and not necessarily just in midlife. It's really about values. So I listened to this lecture. To be honest with you, most of it went way over my head. But I was kind of used to that because I had been going to the Grange since 12, and most of those homilies went way over my head. But what was true is that something resonated inside me that I knew would be important for my own growth and my own journey. So I picked up this book, which I've read most of. I've actually read many of James's books. And I just opened to a page that's heading is Spiritual Maturity. And I thought, maybe that's why Jesus brought his three close friends up the mountain for that experience of transfiguration. I want to, I'm going to do a little bit of reading, but I promise it won't be terribly long, because James has three criteria for what he thinks contributes to a mature spirituality. And I think in an amazing amount of synchronicity, these three criteria are also what those disciples experienced at the Transfiguration. Recall Jung's comment that we all desire something larger than us, something that reframes our experience and puts it into a depth dimension. Then, of course, we are obliged to develop, whether conscious or not, whether overt or not, a deeper, more mature spirituality. Criteria number one from James. Rather than provide us with simplistic answers, which certainly might go a long way to assuage the anxieties generated by ambiguity, one's spirituality must humbly respect the mystery and confess that any understanding of the essential mystery of life that my poor brain and limited imagination can formulate is surely a product of my own complexes or my need for certainty. Only a spirituality that confesses that it knows not has a shot of growing, evolving, and engaging the perils and uncertainties of our life's journey. Second, a mature spirituality is one that obliges us to grow and perhaps to go deeper into life than is comfortable. That demands that we live with grief, fear, and limitations rather than inflations. And finally, a mature spirituality is one that respects the principle of resonance. If some image or encounter resonates deeply within us, it has meaning for us. If it does not, it is not for us. We do not create resonance. Resonance is the mutual hum of like to like, a resounding, if you will. Jung recognized more and more throughout his years in practice that most people were struggling with a religious or spiritual issue, whatever the venue of their symptoms. And he framed it this way: the cure we seek is not a resolution of a conflict, but in transcendence of its debilitating opposites. The cure is in the approach to the numinous. That is that which touches us most deeply and leads us into a radical encounter with that which is larger. Exactly what our three friends experienced in that transfiguration. And permit me just a story from James, and then I'd love to hear your comments if you have any. He writes, I once had a client remanded to AA and therapy by a judge for her repeated drunken driving arrests. Naturally, she resisted both. But by rule of law, she attended both. After a few sessions, she told me that in listening to the metaphor of the higher power in her AA groups, she asked herself, what is my higher power? What formed before her mind's eye was the shape of a bottle. And that, she thought, that is way too small. And at that moment, she got it. She moved willingly from her treatment plan, which had kept her enslaved to a larger frame of values. From that numinous encounter, her life began moving towards a better place. That is what Jung meant by the encounter with the numinous, in order that we may reframe our particular traditions, experiences, and situations. And finally, in our understandable flights from difficulty, from suffering, we naturally seek more comfortable paths. But what if we find that it is in the most difficult, fretful precincts of suffering that real meaning is to be found? If we reach that understanding, we have an enlargement of consciousness, no longer driven by the flight from the difficult, but by an embrace of the task that combines both the difficult and the meaning that makes all life and all joy possible. Rilke put it this way in his advice to that young poet: "We know little, but that we must trust in what is difficult is a certainty that will never abandon us. It is good to be solitary, for solitude is difficult. That something is difficult must be one more reason to do it."